Say the name Iowa to your average college football fan across the country. They're going to name one of two positions: tight end, which we covered in our last edition here on Hawkeyes Live, and, of course, the offensive line. We will be previewing the O-line for the Hawkeyes with spring ball up ahead here at the Voice of College Football. We got Corey Brad, of course, who makes it go here on our Hawkeyes channel for a 30-second edition. You can catch Corey's work, of course, more exclusively on From the Hawkeye of the Storm. Corey, how you doing tonight?
Is it September yet, Mark? It feels like it's been forever since we had college football, does it not?
It does, and you've got basketball to keep you occupied, and you're still making that statement.
I do. This is the time of year, Mark, and I remember us talking. I think one of our first shows we did together was about a year ago at this time, because I remember Iowa going into the tournament, and we were having a discussion about March Madness. But after March, the great news, and I know nobody on here cares what I'm about to say, but I'm not a huge NBA guy, but I am a huge Dallas Mavericks fan. So in other words, I'm not going to sit down and watch, Steph versus LeBron. That just doesn't interest me. I mean, I'll watch the finals, but if I watch the Mavs religiously. So I shouldn't say religiously, but I watch them pretty regularly when they're on TV. So Mavs are doing great right now. Spencer Dinwiddie acquired in a trade, and him alongside Luka and Dorian Finney-Smith, and Tim Hardaway Jr. is injured right now, but it's a good group of guys. So I'm actually looking forward to the playoffs. But man, after that, you just start counting down the days to fall camp. That's how I look at sports. I'm not a baseball guy at all.
Well, I used to be, and there's no reason that I shouldn't be now. I still love the game, and I still think it's beautiful, meaning baseball. But for various reasons, I just don't have the time, and I've kind of lost interest. But I was a hardcore, like know everybody's roster, their statistics, everything all the time, Major League Baseball fan for years and years. I want to speculate on a few things that you just mentioned because I'm curious. So I would think that your average NBA fan in the state of Iowa is a Chicago Bulls fan, number one, for two different reasons: the proximity, but also Michael Jordan in that 90s era brought fans from all over the country. But being that close, I would think that most of the NBA fandom would go towards Chicago, number one. Number two, why Dallas?
That's a great question. I've had people ask me that question. So, first of all, people around here, there are some Bulls fans. I don't see any Timberwolves fans. I mean, you got to keep in mind Ames is just a few hours away from Minneapolis. I see no Timberwolves fans around here. Some Bucks fans now in recent years, now that they've become sort of a power. But no, I've just always taken to Dallas. I was a huge Dirk Nowitzki. I mean, I grew up watching Dirk Nowitzki play. I thought he was just a really great guy, humble guy, and yet just a tremendous legend. As far as the NBA is concerned, he's one of the more unique players to ever play the game. I don't think there's any doubt about that. He changed the way the big man is perceived in the league. Now, I know he's not a true five, but his fadeaway is something that I don't think anybody will ever be able to replicate perfectly. And then there's the 2011. I've watched him since probably 2005. Those classic Spurs Mavs games in the playoffs. Timmy Duncan versus Dirk Nowitzki. Got a lot of respect for Tim Duncan too. But the 2011 run and championship is one of the greatest sports moments of my life. There's no question about it, because I haven't been around for many Iowa championships. Well, I was around for the 2006 Big Ten tournament championship. And of course I was around for, if we call a West Division a championship, Mark, was this past year a championship season? Was it a banner season? Because I guarantee you they're going to hang a banner in that arena after the West title.
I don't agree with that. I'm a conference guy. I think you need to make
I agree.
All the way through and win the conference.
It is an accomplishment. I think we can agree with that. That is an accomplishment and a goal to win your division and get there. But it's not a conference championship. So yeah, no, I don't know why I took to Dallas, but I just remember the classic team, and it was Dirk Nowitzki, Josh Howard, if people remember him, Eric Dampier, Sagana Diop, Jerry Stackhouse was on that team at one time. Of course, the 2011 team that won was just a great team of veterans: Jason Terry, Jason Kidd, Peja Stojakovic, Karan Butler was on the bench that year hurt. Jason Kidd, of course, who's now back as the head coach. So yeah, I don't know. I just always loved Dallas. I've been to multiple Mavs games in my life. I love downtown Dallas. I think it's a really cool city. And I have a lot of respect for Dirk Nowitzki, and I'm a Luka Doncic fan, of course, now. But yeah, they made some changes before the All-Star break, and I'm feeling good about that. But I'm feeling good about where we are with Iowa football right now as well, because the recruiting, and we can kind of segue into this, Mark, the recruiting front has been very positive now for, I mean, we're talking months on months on months now. I give a lot of credit to Tyler Barnes. We've talked about that, what he's done there. You know, we can talk. I mean, I hear fans all the time talk about how there's nepotism in the program, and you can make that claim. I'm not saying there is or there isn't. It's a fair claim if you want to make it against Kirk because of the situation with Brian. But there's no question about it that his son-in-law, Tyler Barnes, has done a tremendous job. We just saw Iowa had a junior day this past weekend. Austin Cereville is one guy that I talked about with you, Mark, prior to going live here. He is a very highly touted offensive lineman out of Ohio. He has Iowa in his top 6, and I can give you the top 6 here. Ohio State's on the list, Michigan, Cincinnati, Notre Dame, Alabama, and Iowa. So that's about as stacked as you can imagine. I mean, the one outlier in that group as far as powers or blue bloods would be Cincinnati, and yet they just went to the playoff. So that's a pretty tough group to go up against. But let's remember that Iowa did go up against a very similar group in the battle for Xavier Wampa. Granted, it was an in-state kid. They were able to win that battle. I know a lot of recruiting people are very positive about Iowa's chances of getting a pledge from Caden Proctor in the coming months. So, you know, it's good to see Cereville in town. You know, we'll see where that goes. Again, with him and Proctor, if you could land both of those guys in 23, boy, what a boost to that class. So Iowa's not slowed down with recruiting. I know we talked about Leighton Jones, who will actually have Leighton will be on a show that will be released on my channel here in the coming days. So that'll be, I think, enjoyable for people to listen to. He's excited about being a Hawkeye. He wants to be the next great center at Iowa, which is something that should get Iowa fans excited, given the fact that they're losing Tyler Linderbaum. And, of course, we know Alex Moda. The recruiting front is mostly positive right now. Haven't really heard a whole lot of negatives. We still haven't heard any updates from Mac Markway or, Kyler Casper. I think we're going to be waiting for a while on those. There were rumors that what's his face, the tight ends coach that got fired or let go at Florida. Now his name escapes me. Former Minnesota head coach.
Tim Brewster.
There were rumors that he was actually going to take the job at Miami. So there were rumors that he was going to go to Notre Dame, and then I read during this past week that they're rumored to go to Miami. You cover Miami. I mean, you're always involved with Miami football. Have you heard any of those rumors, Mark?
Tim Brewster to Miami, yes.
And is there any substance to those?
I've not heard that out of anyone who has any credibility. People in the chat and commenting to the channel have picked up on it somewhere. But I've not talked to anyone or seen anyone who has written about it or verbalized it that's in the media or any type of analyst.
Yeah, and so that would be a blow to Iowa's chances, I think. Just like it would be a blow if he went to Notre Dame. From what I know about Mac Markway, he is a big fan of Tim Brewster. Miami was on his list. Of course, he committed to Florida initially, so he would be just going a bit further south in the state of Florida to play for the Hurricanes. But that is wide open right now. That's another name, Mark. And we don't have to. I know we're going to talk about the offensive line and previewing spring ball, but I was critical of the move to make Brian Ferentz the OC/QB's coach. 2 weeks ago? Has it been 2 weeks now? A little over maybe a little over a week. Tim Brewster, I mean, if you're going to hire a tight ends coach, he would have been a guy. Like, if you're going to make that move, Tim Brewster would have been on my candidate list, right? It probably would. I shouldn't say guarantee you land Mac Markway, and you're not going to hire a coach just for a specific player. But that certainly would have been an option. I'm not taking a shot at Abdul Hodge. I got a lot of flack this past week about how I'm not giving Abdul Hodge a chance, and he's a great guy. I've never, Mark, you know this. I've never said a bad word about Abdul Hodge. I need it, to me, it needs to be proven that he can coach tight ends, and that's yet to be seen. I do believe in him as a person and as a human, as a man. And he's got great character, and I'm excited for him to be on the staff. I guess my point is, I'm frustrated still. I'm not like I said last week, I'm not distraught. I'm not crying in my pillow at night. There's lots of things to be positive about with Iowa football, specifically recruiting and the fact that we've got spring practice a couple weeks away.
We're talking Hawkeyes with all of you for the next 45 to 50 minutes here at the Voice of College Football. Once again, we appreciate your support. The Super Chat's available, as well as Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. Just search Mark Rogers TV and let us know that it's for the Iowa channel. Also, that you want to head on over, this being March, you especially want to head on over to From the Hawkeye of the Storm right here on YouTube. With Iowa basketball. Do they have their Big Ten tournament assignment?
Yeah, so they're a 5 seed. They'll play the winner of Nebraska, Northwestern. Nebraska riding hot right now. 3 straight wins, including a win at Ohio State and a win at Wisconsin. So Hoiberg's got things rolling. That's a dangerous round 2 game if they can get there, if the Huskers can get there. But they'll get Northwestern or Nebraska, and then we'll have a post-game show Thursday with Gary Close in the afternoon. So, yes, definitely head over there. Lots of March Madness coverage, including Iowa women. Both the men's and women's teams are doing great right now. Iowa women just won the Big Ten tournament in their respective side.
Our guy, Eric, Oregon fans here. Appreciate you being here, Eric, and reminding everyone that we talk outlet football 24/7, 365 on Discord. So you go to Patreon, search Mark Rogers TV. I get you the link as soon as you sign up there on Patreon, and you can talk college football and pick out your channel. We've got the conferences divided, and as the season approaches, we'll be setting it up even more specifically for your conversation. Maybe we can fit this in real quick. There was a historic trade made in the NFL today concerning Russell Wilson, former Wisconsin Badger, for a season, leading them to the Rose Bowl, of course. And moving on to the Denver Broncos. And also on the same day, Aaron Rodgers signs and I'm sure you're in full support of this move, the largest contract in the history of the NFL.
Yeah. I thought about that later after our conversation. Thought maybe I was too hard on Rodgers. I get why people like him, and he's a great quarterback. A bit surprised that he ended up back in Green Bay. The Russell Wilson move is interesting because a guy that got moved in that trade was former Hawkeye Noah Fant, who is once again a Hawk, as I saw OS for Hawks said in our chat. Once again, a Hawk as he moves to the Seattle Seahawks, and an opportunity. Seattle's got a history with tight ends. Jimmy Graham had some unbelievable years with Seattle. So it'll be interesting to see who's the quarterback in Seattle right now. Is it Geno Smith?
Well, he's the most recent backup quarterback, yes.
So it's either him or Drew Lock, because Drew Lock was involved in the trade as well. But
okay.
Man, that's not.
I did not see the particulars of the trade. So we got Drew Lock going to Seattle. Okay. I would think Drew Lock would be the preferred starter over Geno Smith.
I thought Geno Smith has played pretty well ever since he got his jaw busted in that fight years ago. I thought he's actually played pretty well when he's been called on. He's a tough guy. I wonder if he got a bit humbled from that incident in New York. But yeah, we'll see if Seattle goes after anybody. And I don't know how high do they don't have any. Let's see. I know they got draft picks. I'd have to look at the ins and outs of that trade as well. Because I'm not sure. I know they got at least, I want to say Seattle got at least 2 first-round draft picks. I mean, they did pretty well in the trade. If you look at it straight up, I mean, Russell Wilson's best years, can we agree his best years are probably behind him?
Probably.
So you're getting a young guy who could project as a superstar, and Noah Fant. Yes, I'm biased. I get it. Drew Lock's a young quarterback. Was Drew Lock a first-rounder?
He was, I do not believe he was a first rounder. He was close. He was in that top 100 picks. I'd have to verify that. I don't remember Drew Lock being in the first round.
Yeah, and you're going to get, I think 2 first rounders and then a couple other picks. That's a lot. I said the same thing, and I got ripped for this too, privately. I get ripped publicly and privately, Mark, for the record. I got ripped for my opinion privately with the Stafford trade, because I thought at the time, the Lions are actually doing pretty well with this trade. I mean, they got a bunch for Matthew Stafford. And again, I could say the same thing about Matthew Stafford. His best years were behind him. Well, what does he go out and he wins a Super Bowl for LA? But Detroit actually did pretty well from a trade perspective. They got a lot of value. We'll see if they can translate it. They got terrible management in the front office. But I could say the same thing about Seattle today. But it'll be interesting to see what Fant does, because I don't want to say he was underutilized, but at times I think he was in Denver. And he was underutilized at Iowa. He's kind of one of those guys who's just, you look at him on the football field, he looks like a freak athletically. And I know he did really well at the combine. I mean, the guy is a pretty darn good specimen, athletic specimen. And it'll just be interesting to see whoever's throwing to him. That'll be a storyline. But again, can he become a top 5 NFL tight end? I don't think he's there yet. I think you make the argument that Hawkinson is, most certainly Kittle is, but that could change the dynamic of our upcoming tight end debate, Mark.
Could it? Okay.
Absolutely. If Iowa's got 3 of the top 5 tight ends in the league.
Who is determining whether they've got 3 of the top 5 tight ends, though?
No, Matt. Okay, let's just take this one at a time. Is George Kittle a top 5 tight end in the league?
Yes.
Is TJ Hawkinson a top 5 tight end in the league?
I think it could be argued. I don't have numbers in front of me. I think
it can be argued as well. But I'm just saying, I would probably place him right along 4 or 5. Again, having to line everybody up. But I think Fant has the potential for that. So I'm not saying he's there yet. I'm just saying if he can get there, and then you potentially can argue that they've got 3 of the top 5. I mean, that would help your argument, right?
Oh, well, sure, certainly it would. It would help your argument. And it depends on what type of parameters we put on the argument, whether we go more historic or more recent, and how productive were those guys, George Kittle in particular, in Iowa, in college versus what they're doing in the NFL, and how do you weigh that out as well? Drew Lock, by the way, was the 42nd pick in that particular draft, so just 10 spots out of the first round. And the other thing I would say about Russell Wilson is that in this day and age of quarterback play, and guys like Aaron Rodgers and obviously Tom Brady is the classic example of playing into their 40s, he's only 33. So I would have completely agreed with you at another point in history, but now it's possible that he could still have 5-7 great years in front of him.
And I'm sorry, you said Russell or Aaron?
Russell Wilson, 33.
The only thing about Russell Wilson is his playing style.
Sure, he runs around.
That does play into this more so than a Tom Brady, of course. So you could be right. Maybe he'll go to. I just don't know, what does Denver have besides Jerry Jeudy, and now they lose their. I mean, you could argue Noah Fant was their top offensive option. I mean, they don't really have a lot of skill position talent. I mean, besides Jeudy.
No, they don't. I know that, and I don't follow the NFL from the standpoint that I used to, in knowing teams' rosters and really having a grasp on how good these teams are. I just watch the games as a fan on Sunday and do no more reading or anything else to follow the league. But I know that when I was discussing Aaron Rodgers going to Denver a couple months ago, had a number of people respond that Denver just had this loaded roster. That,
I mean, Cortland Sutton's on that team. I forget about him. I mean, that's a pretty good 1-2 punch at receiver. But I mean, I don't think it's
Melvin Gordon.
Who's old now. I mean, he's old if we're looking at it from a running back.
Age. Sure.
He had a decent year last year, but definitely not the back he was 5 years ago. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting to see what happens there. Like I said, I think from an Iowa perspective, fans will be following Fant's career. We haven't really seen Seattle does not typically, on a totally different note. Seattle does not typically. There aren't a lot of Iowa guys that end up in Seattle. There are certain franchises that you can just tell, like Iowa. I mean, Green Bay is one of those franchises that just repeatedly gets Iowa players, and they work out there. There's no question about it. But yeah, I mean, like, I'm trying to think. The last guy I know, Iowa had a D tackle there just a couple of years ago. I'm trying to think of who it was. But Tony Moyaki was there briefly. But yeah, hopefully Noah Fant can change that. I think he's got an opportunity.
Our guy Cole's here on a regular basis. We appreciate him being here. And he is asking the question for us to put percentage projections on each team in the Western Division winning the division.
It's a tough one. I'd love to do that. But Cole, I can spitball this, but please don't quote me. That's really hard when you're trying to factor 14 teams into this, Mark. Or excuse me, seven teams. Yeah. 7 teams into this. Yeah, I'd probably go like, again, spitballing it. Wisconsin 30%, Iowa 15, Minnesota. Let's see where we're at. 45. I gotta count my numbers. Minnesota 15, Purdue 15. What does that put us at? 75. I'm just trying to get to 100.
I'm not keeping track.
Nebraska wouldn't be. I think Nebraska would probably be like 8 to 10%, somewhere in there. Who am I missing besides Illinois? Northwestern. Yeah, I'd probably put Northwestern right there with Nebraska, and then Illinois maybe 5%. I don't know where we're at with the numbers. But anyways, yeah, I would probably say that Iowa's right there. I'd say it is the second favorite behind Wisconsin. And I know Cole, I'm pretty sure Cole's a Nebraska fan. I'm high on Nebraska this next year. Now, maybe the transfer shot will not work. I mean, it's clear Scott Frost is pulling out all the stops. I mean, he's desperate right now. He's got to get it done this next year. But I have a feeling they got some good personnel in there. Now, it may not mesh. There's a lot of factors that go into the transfer portal, but I think they've got a chance. And Ronan Jones, he says, you said Fant was underutilized, and then he said he was their biggest weapon. Judy and Sutton would strongly disagree. Well, first of all, he was underutilized in the sense that I think he could have been utilized more in the passing game. Okay. But the Broncos' offense was not good. So when I say that he was their biggest weapon, that simply means he was the best they had, in my opinion. But I don't remember a time, and I'm not a Denver fan, but I don't remember a time that Denver's offense wowed me. So he was their best option, in my opinion, because I don't think Sutton and Judy. Now, Judy's young, and Sutton's not young or not old either. But I think Fant could have been utilized differently. I think Fant could be utilized a lot like George Kittle is. George Kittle is by far San Francisco's. Well, I think by far their best offensive option. Now, people may agree with that because of Samuel.
Yeah.
But over the course of the last, how many years? 5 years. I think it's, he's been there the longest and definitely been the most steady as far as production. You can disagree with that if you want. I just remember times where I've watched the Broncos and thought, why the heck are they not throwing him the ball more?
Well, Noah Fant did catch 68 last year. My guy Melvin Gordon ran for 4.5 yards a carry and 8 touchdowns and just under 1,000 yards. And Javonte Williams, the former North Carolina back, who was a first-year player rookie, pretty much matched Gordon at 900 yards and about 4.5 yards per carry.
How many catches for Sutton and how many catches for Judy?
Judy at 38. He was hurt, I think.
And how many for Sutton?
58.
And how many for Fant again?
68.
So Fant was their best option if you're just looking purely from a reception standpoint. You can't do that. I get it, but yeah, now it's clearly Sutton. I don't know what they're doing at tight end. I don't even know who Denver has at tight end. So I know they ran a lot of two tight end sets. So but anyways, I digress. We're kind of getting off topic here.
We are. Actually, Albert O, who was the connection with Drew Lock at, can't remember how to pronounce his last name. It's got a million letters. Albert O, they call him, from Missouri, came with Drew Lock to Denver, and he was their number 2 tight end with 33 catches.
Okay.
And he was an All-American.
They'll probably be okay there at that position.
Just to answer Cole's question from my perspective, I'm not going to add up the percentage totals per se, but I like Wisconsin as a fairly heavy favorite in a balanced division. And I tend to right now like Minnesota and Nebraska more than Iowa. Once I look into Minnesota's quarterback situation, I don't know what they're going to do there in place of Tanner Morgan.
You like Nebraska more than Iowa. That's
Yeah, I
interesting.
tend to right now.
I'm not mad at you for that, Mark. I don't think that's a bad take. You know, I'm high. I mean, I think saying 8 to 10% chance they win the division is fairly high. I wouldn't say that's as high as Iowa because Iowa does have a lot returning, and there are some people who believe. Let's remember, as much as I firm in my belief that Iowa's not going to hit 10 wins in the regular season next year. Purdue's got a tough schedule, not as tough as the other players. Wisconsin's got a tough schedule. Minnesota has a tough schedule. Purdue's got the most favorable of the top 4, and I don't believe Nebraska's in that top 4. Nebraska's schedule is favorable. That's the other part about this. So if you're just going off talent plus schedule, Purdue is probably my number 1. Nebraska is my number 2, and then Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota. But you can't do it that way because there's a lot more involved in this. But and thank you, Jermaine. I see him in the chat. Cedric Lattimore was the Seahawk I was trying to think of. That I don't know why I blanked out on Cedric, but he was with Seattle. Played a little bit, I think, 2 years ago. So yeah, but again, adding Fant will be an interesting experiment.
Welcome in, everyone. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football, our weekly Iowa show every Tuesday at 4:30 Central Time. Leave your comments and questions. Consider contributing to the channel via the Super Chat or Venmo, PayPal, Cash App as well. Thought there was something there I wanted to add, but it slipped me by at this point. All right, we'll keep moving on. Tyler Goodson at the NFL Combine with a nice showing. I saw him through many of the drills, and the NFL Network guys. Daniel Jeremiah. Didn't think I was going to be able to come up with that name. Yes, Daniel Jeremiah, the new Mike Mayock over the past, let's say, 3 years, who I have a lot of respect for. He really liked Goodson's performance at the Combine. Anything else stand out in terms of what transpired for the Hawkeyes in Indy?
Well, I can, as far as the Combine, if anybody doesn't, and I'm not a huge Combine guy, but obviously it's consequential for draft projections. Goodson ended up with a 4.42 on his 40. That's pretty darn good. For a back that when he was at Iowa, I did not feel like there were plays where you watched him on tape, you watched him back, and it's like, wow, that guy's got some speed. But he never like blew me away with speed, Mark. Did he blow you away with speed?
I would love to see the couple that he took to the house 50-plus yards last year. There was the Indiana game, and then there was another one.
Well, he did it a couple times against Maryland. Yeah. Okay. One of them that actually he looked really fast was on a pass play over the top, and he looked fast on that play. But he did, he had a run against Wisconsin, albeit in snowy, cold weather 2 years ago, where he took it to the house. And Tyler Linderbaum was like running right next to him the whole way. Now, I don't know if that's Tyler Linderbaum, who, by the way, did not participate in the Combine, which brings up the other side of the coin. Should he have played in the Citrus Bowl? I'm sure he doesn't regret anything because he's a Hawk through and through. But because of the injury that he sustained in that bowl game, he was not able to participate in the Combine. And my understanding is his draft stock has slipped a little bit in recent weeks, Mark. And I don't know if you've seen this, but he's projected top 10 by a lot of people. I've seen down closer to 20. I hope that's wrong. I hope he goes top 10. Either way, I think he's going to be an exceptional pro. But so Goodson with a 4.42 in his 40, 4.42. The unofficial was a 4.47. I believe it ended up being 4.42. And then vertical jump of 36.5. So broad jump of 123. I don't know how that stacks up to other backs, but he did do very well. You mentioned Daniel Jeremiah being high on him. It's unfortunate we didn't see Linderbaum. Dane Belton did very well in the Combine as well. I think he's got a chance to be a top 3 or 4 round draft pick. No question about it. I don't know how high he can go. I mean, he led the team in interceptions this year, and Iowa was he lead the Big Ten in interceptions, Mark? I almost said that, and then I'm like, did he lead the Big Ten in interceptions? He may have.
I will check us on that.
So it'll be interesting to see where Dane Belton goes. Iowa just continues to churn out defensive backs. It's unbelievable that they can do this. And Dane Belton wasn't on a lot of people's radar last year. And he just continued to make plays, really even flew under the radar during the season because, Matt Hankins had 2 picks against Iowa State. We know Riley Moss had 2 picks against Indiana. Like it's interesting how much he kind of got overshadowed, but he was the most, from an interception standpoint, the most productive defensive back on this roster. And that's why he's leaving early, because he's going to be drafted. He's going to make money in year 1. Of course, Iowa has plenty of talent coming back with Moss and Wampa will be coming in as well. They'll lose Kerner, Merriweather, but yeah, I'm excited to see what Dane Belton does. And what is the date of the draft, Mark?
It's typically the last weekend of April, so somewhere in that April 25th, 27th range. And by the way, 3 players tied for the interception lead in the nation, all 3 Power 5 players, Veron McKinley, Oregon, JT Woods, Baylor, Jair Brown, Penn State with 6, and then just a mass of players had 5.
Including Dane Belton, right? He had at least 5.
Yes, he had 5.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's a really good year. I know just one facet of the game, but, he played that cash position for Iowa that Amani Hooker was known for kind of building here. And so he's going to be, I think he'll be a versatile guy in the league. I mean, certainly he projects more as a safety than a linebacker. I mean, there's no question about that. But I think the league likes versatility, and as well as he tested out at the Combine in Indy, I think he's probably a top 3 round draft pick. I'd be surprised if he slipped to round 4, but either way, he's going to have an opportunity to make some money right away.
On the subject of 40 times, I just want to slip this one in here for obvious reasons, but there is only one school that has produced 2 players sub 4.4, meaning in the 4.3s, and that school's done it twice.
So you're going to tell us who the school is, Mark?
Ohio State.
Ohio State. Yeah. Well, 4.42 is pretty impressive, is it not?
Oh, absolutely.
I did not expect that from Tom Kakert, and I'll repeat what Tom said because he said it on one of my live shows. He had talked to someone who was an NFL guy, and this NFL guy had told Tom, "Look, there's 100 other running backs like Tyler Goodson out there, and it's not a diss on Tyler Goodson. He's an exceptional Big Ten back, but there's not much that he felt separated Tyler, and perhaps there's more athleticism to Tyler Goodson than maybe we thought. And I've never doubted Tyler Goodson's work ethic or his character. I am rooting for Tyler Goodson. Mark, we've talked about Iowa's lack of development at running back. It would really help if Mekhi Sargent could carve out a niche in the league, or if Tyler Goodson, or both. Now, Sargent had, he, I believe, was on Tennessee's roster for a time. Last I knew, he was actually in, I want to say he was in LA with the Rams, but I believe maybe he was practice squad. I'd have to look that up. But my point is both of those guys have an opportunity to work and maybe make a roster. Iowa needs that. If you want to be able to compete recruiting wise with the likes of Wisconsin, I think Iowa's done very well on the recruiting trail at running back ever since Liddell Betts got here. But we see the difference we can talk about offensive line, which we're going to preview here in a moment. But from a running back personnel standpoint, Mark, it's hard to compete when Wisconsin's nabbing guys like Monty Ball and, Melvin Gordon, Jonathan Taylor, and most recently Braylon Allen. So recruiting is a big part of this, and it would help. It would help immensely if you can get a couple of these backs to find a role, even if it's an unorthodox role, a Theo Riddick type role in the league. That would be positive. Similar to how I'm feeling about Iowa basketball right now, I'm riding high on Iowa hoops, partially because I think they can win in the tournament this year, Mark. Keegan Murray is going to be a first-round draft pick, likely a lottery pick if he comes out this year. That's huge news for Iowa recruiting, because now recruits are going to see, look, hey, they're starting to really produce NBA players. Joe Wieskamp just got a regular contract in the league. Luka Garza's in the league. Tyler Cook. I don't know that he's on the active roster right now with the Bulls, but he has been. He started a game, a couple months ago, and that's changed over the past 3 years. Iowa, through 6 or 7 years under Fran McCaffrey, was not producing NBA players. Now you can say they are, and certainly Murray has an opportunity to be a really, really good NBA player who's not going to probably spend any time in the G League, barring injury. So the bottom line is, the more guys you can send to the pros at certain positions and as a program is going to help you on the recruiting trail. So those are all positives out of Indy.
Corey, you sparked a tight end U debate, but I will say, just to extend on your point, if you were making the criteria, who has the best tight ends in the NFL right now? It's a open and shut case. It's not even close. It's Iowa. If that's your one criteria, who has the best tight ends in the NFL right now?
And that's not the only criteria.
Sure.
We've talked about this, Mark, and we can debate about it more in the future. If you're going to go back to the Dallas Clark era, I'm just talking about the Ferentz. If we just go back 23 years, Dallas Clark, Tony Moyaki, Brandon Myers was a starter with Tampa Bay for a good period of his career. CJ Fedorowicz was a starter down in Houston. He was actually a really good, underrated tight end for Houston and had concussion problems and had to retire. People forget about him. And then, Hawkinson, Fant, Kittle. You go down the list. They've had some good tight ends that haven't made it, haven't found a role. But I don't know how many does Miami have right now in the league, Mark?
I can think of, I'm sure they have more than one. I can only think of one, David Njoku. Brevin Jordan was a tight end there, but he went, did he go directly to the league? I thought he transferred first. So probably Brevin Jordan. He did not transfer. Brevin Jordan, David Njoku. 2 for Miami for sure. Of course, their recent past includes Greg Olson, Jeremy Shockey. If you're going to go the last 10 or 15 years for them. There are a couple of questions here in the chat, and one in particular relates to a subject we were going to hit on tonight. And before we hit that one, we will hit the other that I thought was a decent question here, because it runs right into the poll, Corey, that you posted on the channel here.
Oh, crap.
Oh, crap. You posted a poll.
I know. You see, folks, what just happened was not prompted by me. It's not prompted. Mark asked me the question. So, because there'll be people later, you can't let it go, Corey. Why can't you let this go? I'm happy to talk about it, Mark. Let's talk about it.
Why can't I find this poll? I did not know until minutes before the show that you posted this poll. And now I can't find it.
I posted it on our channel. I posted it on my channel, and I posted it on my Twitter.
Okay.
And I have the combined results here as of this morning.
You've got the combined results. Okay.
Yeah, I haven't checked them since then. But the combined results, we've got a total. Let's see. Let me do the math here between the 3 polls. I had this added up earlier. Now I can't find my results. So 153. Okay, so a total number of votes we've had, and now there might be a few overlapped. If there's people who are on subscribers on both channels, they voted twice. That's there's just, you can only vote once per channel. So 323 votes total. 86.4% of people who have voted have said that, in their opinion, Brian Ferentz's promotion to quarterbacks coach is a bad idea for Iowa football. 86.4%, which means 13.6% of people who voted believe it's a good idea for Iowa football. And I have no problem with that opinion. That's why it's an opinion. This is why it's my opinion. I had someone, go after me and claim that I called Kirk Ferentz a fool. I don't think those words have ever come out of my mouth, nor would they, because Kirk Ferentz is not a fool. So, again, it's my opinion that it's not good for Iowa football for a number of reasons. I hope Brian Ferentz and Kirk Ferentz prove me wrong. Again, I'm rooting for this to not play out the way I expect it to, but there's no reason for me to have a lot of confidence in this move, because Brian Ferentz, like him or not, has not inspired confidence in his ability to turn this offense around. And so you're just putting him in charge of a position that, you don't have to play a position to know anything about it. But the fact that he's the OC and QB coach here, and he's never played and he's never coached it, that raises a bunch of red flags to me. So, but the reason I posted the poll is I thought it would just be interesting. Am I crazy? And I actually had somebody else recommend, hey, why don't you throw a poll up there, and just see what happens? And so, 86.4% of people don't like it. But as you know, Mark, the only people whose opinions matter, I mean, honestly, are the crowds of people, right? The masses, and specifically those big donors. I mean, if you have these big donors get together and say, we're sick and tired of this, and I don't know, maybe they're not sick and tired of this, and maybe there's some that are, maybe there's some that aren't. I don't know how much it would take, and I'm not suggesting that they get together. I'm not trying to incite a riot here, all right? But it ultimately doesn't matter if 86.4% of our listeners vote that way, because most of us were not big donors.
They will soon be the masses, though. The 86% from our collective channels.
Why do you say that?
We're hoping. Pardon me?
Why do you say that?
I'm saying that with optimism that one day they will represent the Iowa mass.
Okay. In the future, 86.4% of our future. Okay, I get you. So, yeah, and for the record, this doesn't mean I'm not going to ever go to a game at Kinnick. That's the other thing. Like, if there's a large group of people that say, even as just general fans who have season tickets year in and year out, I hate this move. Like, what percentage of those people, the 86.4% of season ticket holders, and I bet you it's not quite that high, but maybe it is. 86.4% of season ticket holders say, I really don't agree with this move by Kirk Ferentz. I think it's nepotism. I think it's wrong. I don't think Brian's qualified. I don't think it's fair to the program. What percentage of those people are going to give up their season tickets, which are a big part of fall for so many people in this state, Mark? It's a huge part. Going and tailgating, spending time with family. Now you can drink booze at these games. It's a big part. And I love the game day experience, for the record. I love the game day experience, but you can get away with something. You got to push them. You got to push Iowa fans. They're loyal people. I give Iowa fans a lot of credit for that. They are loyal people that love Iowa football. So I don't believe that it's going to be enough to change this move. Let me just add this in there, and I'm not implying anything. I'm not trying to make anybody soil themselves. But let's just remember, the Raiders yesterday, according to USA Today, released their coaching staff. The only position that has not been filled yet is the tight ends coach position. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying. I'm just saying. All right, that's a fact. The tight ends coach position, I believe, is the one position that I said Oakland, Las Vegas has not filled. Very likely will not be Brian Ferentz, but Mark, it's sort of intriguing just to see who they hire, right? I mean, that was the franchise that he was rumored to be leaving for. So, you never know. You never know. I'm going to be curious to see when that. It's taking a while for Josh McDaniels to get that filled, and I'm just sort of intrigued by it.
Folks, leave any poll questions that you think should be our next question to serve up to the masses. So if you have any questions that you would like to see what the response would be from the Hawkeye of the Storm and everyone here at the Voice of College Football, then let us know and leave those questions there in the live chat, and we will make a poll this week. We've got about 10 minutes left, and there was a insightful comment/question concerning the offensive line. Here we go. Charles, thank you so much for being here. Curious to see how David Cobb, Stevens, don't know his first name, Michael Mislinsky progress into year 2. Do you see anyone pulling Colby and supplanting anyone who is projected to start?
Yeah, I'm glad that Charles brought us back to the topic that we were supposed to spend the majority of the show talking about. That's okay. Let me just ask you this, Mark, and for everybody who's on here, Mark covers college football all over the country. Did you know Did you know David Cobb's first name off the top of your head, or did you because you looked at it prior to the show?
I knew, actually, what's funny is when I read that, I knew David Cobb's only because I read an article before the show, about 15 or 20 minutes before the show. But I did know Connor Colby, but when I read this, I blanked and couldn't remember his name.
What about Mislinsky? Did you know his first name was Michael?
Yes.
You just knew that.
But I skipped over Stevens because I don't know his first name.
How do you know these things? I mean, like, how do you know the third string center at Iowa? of the
because
time.
I hear this stuff and I look at stuff constantly,
You got a good
and I've got a
memory.
good memory. I do
Yeah.
have a good but at the same time, I produced I'll say this very quickly because we need to get on to more important things. Like I produced a Big 12 all-time program ranking, and I had just so much running through my mind concerning all these programs and all the criteria I laid out there that I misstepped in citing that TCU just messed up their years and belonging to the conference and so forth and so on. And so people just hammered me for that. And I thought, okay, this is a case in which I know exactly what I'm talking about concerning TCU football. And when they were in certain conferences, I was just talking and I misspoke. I don't know if other people do this. I do this
Oh,
on occasion
you
where
have no idea.
I might say Tom Brady played for the New York Jets. Of course, I know that he never played for the New
I
York
know.
Jets, but it just came out and I didn't even catch it. And that was one of those things with TCU's conference affiliation. And I could already tell, okay, I'm going to get hammered on this. I pulled the video. I'm going to have to recut the video because people are going to be like, you don't know what you're talking about.
Mark, there was I did a short post game after the Iowa women's basketball quarterfinal game in the Big Ten tournament this past week, which, by the way, I enjoyed doing those shows. We had some different listeners. I appreciate everybody that tuned in for those women's basketball shows. I haven't done any women's shows all year, but yeah, I had one of those nights. It was like 45 minutes of a show, and I even had Darrell MVP came. I remember his comment because it summed the night up. He just commented, and he didn't hurt my feelings. He hit the nail on the head. He said Corey's having problems with words. I just said, look, when me as a talking head or a talk show host, you want to call me a talk show host, YouTube talk show host, if I'm having problems with words, if I'm having problems with talking, that's probably not a good thing. So I completely
I've
understand where
been
you're
there.
coming from.
Yeah. The only one that I will note as well that I found amusing was that Georgia Tech, when they hired Jeff Collins as head coach, for some reason I had this brain block that I kept referencing him as Jeff Jenkins, who was a left fielder for the Milwaukee Brewers back in the 1980s. And I just had that in my head. And I had to at some point state to people when they were like, you don't know what you're talking about. I said, I've interviewed the man, Jeff Collins. Like, I know who he is. It just comes out every so often, Jeff Jenkins instead of Jeff Collins.
Well, Mark, I don't know how you haven't had to have like a vocal cord, transplant because you're on here all the time. And people need to realize, I feel like I talk myself to death. And sometimes my mind just decides, okay, it's not going to work today, but you're constantly talking. So you should have even more leeway. In answer to Charles's question, it's a good question. David Cobb had gotten hurt. I don't know if it was during fall camp last year or during the season, but my understanding is that really slowed his progress. Michael Mislinsky is going to have a chance, I think, at center. We'll see if Matt Fagan, who's a former walk-on, I think Fagan's on scholarship now. If he wasn't this past year, he most certainly will be. It'll probably be a battle between Mislinsky and Fagan. The offensive line, we have spent the majority of the show talking about other matters, but this is an intriguing battle this spring because you're losing maybe the best player in the country. You most certainly could argue he was the best player in the Big Ten. Not saying I'm going to be dogmatic about it, but Tyler Linderbaum is a superstar at that position at this level. People don't realize how good he is as a center. Iowa fans do, but people across the country don't realize how good Tyler Linderbaum was and is. So losing him's a huge blow, Mark, and he's the anchor of that line. I believe he was Spencer Petrus's roommate. So some chemistry potentially lost if Spencer ends up being the starting quarterback. We'll see what happens with Mislinsky. We know Leighton Jones, the new commit, won't be here till 23. They expect him to play center, but he ain't getting here this year. So who else is a candidate? I don't really know the answer to that. Kyler Schott moves on as well. I thought it was intriguing, Mark, at one point, and I don't know if this changed, but Kyler Schott told the media that he wasn't really, and I don't want to misquote him on this, so I want to be careful how I word this, but basically in summary of what he said was that he wasn't ever really approached about returning for a super senior year, which I find interesting. He was undersized. I don't think he's really on many draft boards. I guess I haven't looked that far. But with him being gone, that's just one less, plug to fill in there. And they struggled mightily those first few games. Remember, he got injured bailing hay prior to the season. and they missed him those first few games, and they struggled a bit without him. My understanding, I'm trying to remember when he came back. I remember we ran into, when we did our college football, that was fun, by the way, the game day coverage from outside Jack Trice Stadium. Did you enjoy that, Mark?
Oh, it was phenomenal. I loved it.
That.
I just thought, and we didn't know each other quite as well, of course, then. And I just thought, man, you know, on one hand, I thought this guy's crazy. He's out there at 5 o'clock in the morning in the dark. Like when you posted your first video, which I got to say, I did not watch these live. You know, I was up at whatever 9 o'clock in the morning myself. But yeah, I was not there for you at 5 a.m. or whatever time it was. You posted that first video, and until other people entered the frame, I thought, is he out there by himself? Is he doing this by himself? Is there nobody else out there? But those were exceptional. Those were tremendous. I half thought you were crazy, and then I reasoned, you know what? I would do the same thing and have done the same thing. So I guess.
Oh yeah,
we're cut from the same cloth.
I greatly enjoyed it, and I wonder how many steps I wish I had a Fitbit on that day, because I had to have done 1,000,000 steps. No, that was fun, but we ran into Kyler Schott's girlfriend, and so I remember her telling us that he was going to be back. So he either came back week 2 or week 3, so he wasn't out more than a couple games. But they did struggle there early. Even that Indiana game, like the big run early by Tyler Goodson, broke things loose. But that was largely. That win was predicated on an offense in Indiana that's just terrible, and that bore itself out the rest of the season. Michael Penix, I mean, it started that first. I mean, thinking back to that first drive for Indiana, it was a disaster, and I felt bad for Penix because, boy, what a year he had in 2020. But my point is, Schott was a key cog, and the offensive line wasn't great the rest of the year, but it did improve when he came back. So, where does Justin Britt's development go? You know, is he a guy who can be an every down guy? He hasn't proven to be that yet. They need him to step up and be an every down guy at guard. Cody Ince is a guy that I was high on last year, and I think he suffered from some injuries this year. But you know, I mean, he's going to be a senior next year. They need him. I mean, he's a big guy. He's probably going to stay at guard, would be my guess. He's ran some at tackle during practice, but they need him to step up. I mean, he's a 5th-year guy, Mark. He needs to really, hopefully he can stay healthy, but take the bull by the horns and secure a spot. Connor Colby, I don't know what his, I don't know how to answer the question completely from Charles, because I don't know what Connor Colby, what his future is. Does he end up sliding out to tackle? Is that possible at 6'6", 300? You know, that I certainly think it would be. If they slide him out to tackle, perhaps at right, you know, are you confident enough in Mason Richmond at left tackle and Connor Colby at right? That means you've got, Richmond will be a 3rd-year guy, but a redshirt sophomore, and then a true sophomore anchoring you on the outside. They did that with Tristan Wirfs and Alaric Jackson, and it was a bit of a learning curve, but boy, both those guys ended up working out tremendously well. They're both in the league now. Tristan Wirfs maybe the best tackle in the league. And maybe you probably disagree with that, Mark, but he's one of the best tackles in the league. I think we can agree upon that. Well, I said it, and then I realized, who is the best tackle in the league, Mark? It's probably not Wirfs, but he's right up there.
Yeah, he's right up there. I was not ready to disagree with it.
Okay.
Because I don't have a firm opinion on that. I know that he's one of the best. Absolutely.
Tom Brady did not look good in that playoff game without Tristan Wirfs. And it was a big part of that. If he doesn't have protection off that edge, he's not himself. But anyways, will Colby and Richmond progress enough in the spring? There's a lot of development that needs to happen, and some of this is going to happen in the summer. I'm sure there's some strength and conditioning taking place during the winter, but for the most part, summers for lifting weights and hitting the weight room hard and getting bigger and stronger. So some of this will occur there because you need that. I mean, there were some fundamental issues that cropped up last year along the line. And I am by no means an offensive line guru. I said that when I did my breakdown of Leighton Jones this past week when he committed as a center. I mean, he's never played center, Mark. He's played tight end, defensive end, and they're recruiting him at center. And I love doing recruiting reactions, but I always preface everything I say with, look, I am by no means an offensive line guru. What I can tell you is that Kirk Ferentz he's an offensive line coach. And he's got George Barnett, who's also an offensive line coach, who seems to be really liked around the program. I know, he's new, and I don't know how he's perceived from everybody from the outside looking in, but he seems to be liked by people like Leighton Jones and people he's recruiting. That's good. That's a positive. But they need to be able to develop guys like Colby and Mason Richmond. David Cobb is kind of the dark horse, because I think I'd have to look back at the rankings. Him and Colby were neck and neck as far as the recruiting rankings coming into that 21 class. And if my memory serves me correctly, they both enrolled early. So this will be their second spring. That's a big deal. And if David Cobb is healthy, perhaps you compete for playing time on the outside, or perhaps they see him at least initially playing on the inside. Jack Plum's another guy, Mark. A lot of fans threw in the towel on Jack Plum and Nick DeYoung during the season. I remember one comment. I don't know why this comment sticks out. If you're the one who made the comment, I'm not talking about you, but anybody in the chat, Mark, shame on you, because you shouldn't throw in the towel on a kid this soon. But Nick DeYoung, who was, I think, a second, maybe third year guy, I have to look at his. I know he's a junior this next year. I can't remember if he redshirted, but somebody had commented midseason, I never want to see Nick DeYoung play another snap at tackle at Iowa. And that's just, I understand the frustrations when you're not protecting a quarterback who's a statue in Spencer Petras, but there's a reason they're playing him so early. You could make the argument that it's because they don't have anything better behind him, but they like something in Nick DeYoung, Mason Richmond. Those are young guys, and for them to get playing time and infringe on playing time from an older guy like Plum or even Ince, that's a positive. So yeah, the young guys, it's going to be cool to see. I was high on David Cobb when he came into high school. I wasn't as high on Connor Colby, but he sure looks like he's a guy who can perhaps slide out to tackle, and they need help out there, especially if they're going to roll with Spencer Petras. He's never going to be a real mobile guy. That's just not going to happen. Alex Padilla can offset a bit of those pass protection struggles, but if you can get a tackle, especially on that right edge where they struggled primarily. I mean, Mason Richmond had his moments as well, but if they can get a really solid piece there at right tackle, I think Spencer can. We saw him in 2020. Spencer didn't have a bad year in 2020. He had a average year after those first two games. When he was being protected, when the run game was working, their offense was okay. It was not great. I wouldn't even say it was good. It was mediocre to good. This last year, it was bad. We know that. So, but the offensive line is a big key to offsetting some of the problems at quarterback.
Scott Fuchita, who was a rather stellar offensive lineman himself. Scott Fuchita, or am I mixing him up with somebody else? I think he was a linebacker, actually. Anyway, no, Scott Fuchita, offensive lineman. Anyway, he lists Tristan Wirfs as the 7th best offensive lineman in the NFL, and he's got several tackles ahead, maybe 4.
What does Scott Fuchita do now? Is he in the media?
He's in the media. He wrote an article for someone.
Very interesting. Okay.
I don't know why I'm mixing him up, not remembering whether he was a linebacker in our offense. I think he was an offensive lineman. It would make sense, not that he couldn't evaluate other
I was thinking he was a linebacker, but I could be wrong.
Yes. Anyway, I'm blanking on him in terms of, except for knowing that he played a long time in the NFL. I'm blanking on where he played in college and how good he was and where he played. But shoot, I probably watched him play 100 times. See, that's where my memory's failing me right there. Scott Fuchita. I know that name, and again, I've seen him play 100 times. I guarantee it, but I can't come up with it right now. Now, to give the source credit here, this comes from the Daily Iowan and their projected offensive line starters for this season. They're going Cody Ince, left guard, who they consider to be the most versatile offensive lineman.
I would agree with that. At least so far, roster. Connor Colby could end up being that guy, but Cody Ince has, again, ran both at guard and tackle.
They believe that Michael Mislinsky will be the center.
That seems to be the hot narrative. I don't know what people are basing that off of, because I believe Fagan was primarily the backup this past year, but Mislinsky is on scholarship. Fagan was not. So That makes sense. So, you hope that he can progress. You're giving him a scholarship to play that position.
As you mentioned, Justin Britt started the first 3 games of the season when Schott was down, and then he was in the regular rotation. They've got him starting at right guard, and then Connor Colby at right tackle, who started the final 11 games.
And who did you say left tackle, Mark?
Connor Colby at right tackle. Wait a minute. Who do I have at left tackle? That must be
Richmond.
shoot, I didn't finish my list. Although they mentioned that David Cobb, they consider him to be the most intriguing prospect.
Yeah. Well, we're kind of in agreement on that. Richmond will probably end up being that guy at left. But again, where does that leave Jack Plum? That's an interesting. Jack Plum's a guy he's got to. It's now or never for Jack Plum. He's had moments. I thought he played decently well in 2020 when he filled in for Coy Cronk when he went down with an injury. And Mark Kallenberger also was there helping. But yeah, I mean, it's now or never for guys like Plum and Ince. Ince has been better. Again, he struggled with some injuries. Jennings Dunker is another guy on the roster. Trying to think of other possibilities. I mean, you've got like Tyler Ellsbury. I don't know if he's a big kid. I think he's close to 300. They've got pieces. I've said this all along, Mark. That's why, and I understand why people got frustrated that I was always on going to get a quarterback. But let me just rehash why I was so high on that. It wasn't because I was in denial about Iowa's struggles up front. It was simply from a personnel standpoint. Thank you, Jermaine. From a personnel standpoint.
I just can't believe I blanked on that because Scott Fuchita, I must have watched the guy play 100 games and he was rating offensive linemen. So I thought, yeah, Scott Fuchita offensive. And then I thought, no, he's a linebacker. I'm sorry, Corey, keep going.
No, it's okay.
I'm going to interrupt you again just because of the picture setting in the article. I missed the left tackle position, but they're projecting Mason Richmond to be the left tackle.
Yeah, I mean, that would be great news because that means you'd like your older guys to play like their age, right? I mean, you want Jack Plum to figure it out, but I mean, I just wonder, and I don't know what the market is. Again, we're talking transfer portal. If Plum ends up getting beat out this spring and like Connor Colby's the right tackle and you've got Mason Richmond, the left tackle, Nick DeYoung's got to be somewhere. I mean, he's a young guy. I mean, my guess is he'd be a backup at probably right tackle. Would Plum just settle for being the backup at left? I don't know. Perhaps he hits the port. Perhaps they lose somebody in the portal after this spring. That will be a storyline to follow because Iowa no doubt that Iowa will lose somebody at tackle or at the offensive line somewhere along the offensive line after spring because there's going to be a lot of battles to be had, and obviously you want to find if you're an offensive lineman, regardless of your classification, you want to find a home before summer when, again, the strength and training program might be the most important for those guys in the summer. So it will be intriguing to watch. And I wanted to bring up something else, and now I'm pulling a Mark Rogers, and I'm blanking. Yeah, Bo Stevens. You mentioned Bo. He's a guy. Personnel, that's what we were talking about. My big thing on the offensive line is I think they've got good personnel. They recruited very well there in 2021. Very well at offensive line. It's just a matter of developing these kids. George Barnett has not yet proven that here. But you've got Kirk Ferentz, who is your head coach, who's a position coach. I mean, I would think that they can develop these players. If there's one position that you would expect Iowa to be good at developing, it would be the offensive line. You brought that up at the outset of the show. So personnel-wise, I think they're okay. I do question personnel-wise whether they're okay at quarterback. And that's why I've been so big on the portal being utilized at that position. It would be nice. It would have been nice if Iowa could have, went out and gotten the kid from Cornell who ended up committing to Penn State, Hunter Norzad. But they didn't. And, they'll probably look at things this spring. And if they feel good about where they're at both tackle positions and certainly on the inside, then they probably will ride with that. But if there's somebody that pops up between now and the summertime in the portal, I would not be surprised. They've shown that they're willing to go to the portal at that position, and they just missed. And And hopefully there'll be somebody. There will be guys that enter the portal, but somebody that's attractive to Iowa.
Meanwhile, LSU with a less experienced quarterback room, but a more talented quarterback room, was able to lure in Jayden Daniels.
Can we not talk about it? Mark?
We don't need to talk about it. We're near the end of the show. I wasn't going to talk about it. I just thought it was worth noting. It's been mentioned in the chat. And of course, considering our conversations, Jayden Daniels was willing to leave a surefire starting spot at Arizona State and now compete for a job, which he is most likely going to win. But still, he is facing a quarterback in Miles Brennan who threw 12 touchdowns in his first 3 games 2 years ago, who's a mid to high range 4-star. And then they've got a 5-star freshman who's probably not going to compete this year, but still Jayden Daniels thought it worthwhile to make that jump.
Frustration. I mean, I saw it over the weekend, and you knew it was. I mean, I've lost any hope that I was willing to go to the portal at that position. I mean, a reasonable person may look at this and say, hey, Iowa's got a new QB's coach, Mark. Maybe they're going to have a whole new outlook on the portal and specifically going and getting a portal. But we know that's not the case. If they wanted a quarterback before, they want one now and vice versa. So that won't happen. Yeah, I'm positive about offensive line. Personnel-wise, they will develop this spring. David Cobb is definitely my dark horse to see how he can develop. They need to be good on, not just protecting Spencer, but they've got to be able to sustain a good running attack. They've lost 2 really productive running backs these last 2 years in Mekhi Sargent and Tyler Goodson. Now you get 2 young guys, LaShawn Williams, Gavin Williams, and 2 other players we didn't bring up. We should bring this up before we end the show, Mark. 2 guys, one of which lives about 9 miles south of me, Cale Crow. He's a freshman. He's a future tackle who will be coming in this fall. Did not enroll early. Is that on there?
They're on my list.
And then Jack Dotzler out of Wisconsin. So both those guys, future tackles. I don't expect them to mix in early, but Connor Colby did. And we've seen Kirk willing to play true freshmen at times. If he really likes him, he's willing to play him there if they can develop. It helps when you enroll early. So I would guess that probably won't happen on offense, but those will be guys that hopefully can push the order there at tackle.
From the Hawkeye of the Storm, now that it's March Madness, the Big Ten tournament is just hours away for the most part. And going into the NCAA tournament, catch Corey and his work on From the Hawkeye of the Storm. Anything in particular that you want to point people to?
Yeah, just our post-game work with Coach Gary Close has been awesome. We've been recently we've been able to nab a few former players, and we just had James Moses. Maybe if you remember James Moses from the early 90s at Iowa, Mark, but James Moses was on the show. We had Les Jepson. I was able to do a show live in person with Jess Settles, which was awesome. 2 weeks ago, or a little less than 2 weeks ago? That was a fun time. J.R. Koch was on. We're hopeful to be able to continue that trend. It's a treat to be able to hear from these former guys and be able to reunite them too. I mean, I'm not the one doing. I give Gary Close a lot of credit. He's the one kind of organizing a lot of this because he's got the connections. But it's cool to be able to see them on a show with their former coach, and it's just fun. I know people are enjoying it. All the content is free. We always appreciate donations, as you do, Mark. But it's going to be a fun time now. Conference tournament for the women over. We're waiting to see where they end up in the NCAA tournament field. But Iowa, the men's team, conference tournament getting underway Wednesday. They'll play Thursday, so we'll have post-game coverage throughout the week. I will say this. Anybody that missed our live show yesterday, From the Hawkeye of the Storm on YouTube, sat down with Tim Kruger, bracketologist for Stadium, and had a wonderful time just talking about the bracket and the net rankings and Ken Palm and Sagarin and all these ratings and rankings and the formula for this committee. And he talked about, he's part of the mock committee that kind of sits down and replicates what the committee is doing right now and will be doing, especially later in the week and certainly over the weekend. We just had a tremendous conversation. So if anybody's missed that show, it's available on a podcast. You see there on the bottom ticker, From the Hawkeye of the Storm, on your favorite podcast platform, or you can watch it back on YouTube, From the Hawkeye of the Storm. myself and Tim Kruger, and we took phone calls, took chats. It was a good time, and appreciate Tim jumping on the show with us.
About 50 in the chat tonight. Do us a favor, head on out there and grab some other Iowa fans or college football fans. I was noting at one point we had Kentucky fans in here, Michigan fans, Miami fans, Nebraska fans, and otherwise. So come on in next Tuesday night. And again, bring your, I always refer to this show as being at night because it's been winter and the dead of night, darkness here in Connecticut while we're doing the show, but 4:30 Central Time, of course, 5:30 Eastern every Tuesday night with all of you. So we appreciate you being here. And again, consider bringing some other folks in with you. We'll be back next Tuesday. Corey, enjoy the Big Ten tournament.
I will do that, Mark. You do the same. If you're going to get a chance to watch I know last year I asked you this question. You're like, I don't really watch it anymore. You know, watch any of it?
You wouldn't believe that if this was 15 years ago, I had my mind set to whatever it was, noon on Wednesday, boom, regardless of who was playing the Big Ten tournament and the other tournaments, the ACC, the Big East, all of them, I was
SEC
totally locked in. Now it hits about Saturday and I realize, oh, there have been basketball games going on this week and I had no idea.
Well, to each his own, Mark. I'm going to enjoy it. And if you have the calling, feel free to tune over to the Big Ten Network because it's going to be it should be a fun conference tournament. Iowa, according to a lot of sports books, the second heaviest favorite to win the tournament. They're playing good ball right now despite the loss to Illinois on Sunday, and so an opportunity to improve that seed and do something in the tournament. The Big Ten tournament they haven't won 2 games in a single Big Ten tournament since 2006. Mark, think about that for a second. They got to win a couple games in that tournament this year.
If I'm not mistaken, they beat Ohio State in the final that year.
You got it. Yeah, that was Horner and Haluska, and that was a great memory.
Remember those guys?
They went on to lose. They went on to lose in the first round of Northwestern State as a 2 seed. I believe it was a 2 seed. I think that maybe 2 or 3. I'd have to look back. I don't think they were a 2. But it was a big upset. And I remember I could do the play-by-play for you without even watching the game right now. The last few seconds of that was heartbreaking. But that's what March Madness is all about. Chattanooga, the 30-foot buzzer beater the other night. Mark, if you haven't seen that, what a play against Furman to get them into the championship. Like, that's what's great about college sports. And you have the packed arena going bonkers, and it's heartbreaking for Furman, and it's celebration time for Chattanooga. That we're going to have a lot of that. There's going to be a lot of upsets in the tournament this year, and I'm looking forward to it, Mark.
Very cool. Everybody else, we'll see you back here next Tuesday at 4:30 Central. In the meantime, from the Hawkeye at the Storm and also our various team channels here at the Voice of College Football.